6 years ago, I buried my wife, and yesterday she sent me a message that proved she had never truly died, turning everything I thought I knew about loss and love upside down in an instant. It was one of those endless Seattle Tuesdays when the rain tapped steadily on the roof of our Bellevue house, a persistent rhythm that had become the soundtrack to my ordinary evenings. I was sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by a stack of ungraded history essays from my 10th grade students, their words about revolutions and difficult choices blurring together under the soft glow of the lamp, when the doorbell rang much later than any neighbor would reasonably visit. I rose to answer it, expecting perhaps a delivery or a forgotten friend, but found only silence and a single plain manila envelope resting on the welcome mat, its edges darkened and curling from the soaking rain while the ink spelling my name, Alex Harper, remained impossibly crisp and fresh, as though the words had been written mere moments before the envelope was placed there. I looked up and down the empty street, seeing no car pulling away and hearing no retreating footsteps, and when I later reviewed the doorbell camera footage that night, the recording captured nothing at all. No approaching figure, no hand setting the envelope down, only the rain falling steadily until suddenly the envelope was simply there, as if it had materialized from the storm itself. I brought it inside, closed the door against the damp night, and opened it with careful fingers. A faded photograph slipped out first. Sarah laughing beside a woman I had never seen before, the timestamp on the back marking 6 weeks before the accident 6 years earlier, the day her small boat capsized in a sudden squall on Puget Sound, leaving the Coast Guard to find only the hull drifting empty with her life jacket still clipped to the rail and no sign of her body ever recovered. I had stood at an empty casket during the service, telling our then 9-year-old daughter Emma that her mother had gone to heaven to watch over us, and for the next 6 years I had worked tirelessly to make that story feel true enough for both of us to live with, even as the ache of her absence carved deeper grooves into every quiet moment of our lives. My throat closed painfully as I stared at the photograph, unable to look away from the familiar crinkle at the corners of her eyes when she laughed. Taped behind the image was a small USB drive, and folded beneath it lay a short note in the same neat handwriting that had addressed the envelope. The words read, "Sarah never drowned. She's been watching you and Emma these 6 years. Don't call the police. Meet me at the old lighthouse on Marrowstone Island at midnight. A friend who owes her his life." Those first few words struck me like cold water thrown across my face. Sarah never drowned, and in that instant the carefully constructed life I had built around her absence began to fracture. I had spent half a decade learning to navigate the days without her, from quiet mornings preparing Emma's breakfast alone to holidays where her chair remained painfully empty, from nights when I still instinctively reached across the bed for the warmth that was no longer there. The note was not merely impossible. It was an act of violence against the grief I had finally learned to carry with some semblance of grace. Yet the photograph was undeniable. Her smile, the slight tilt of her head, the way light caught in her hair. It was Sarah, unmistakably and achingly her. For several weeks I had felt an undercurrent of unease, a sense that something was watching us. A black sedan had appeared more than once in the parking lot near Emma's middle school, always in the same shadowed position at the edge of the lot with the same dark tint on the windows, and though I had dismissed it as the heightened paranoia of a single father carrying too much responsibility, the memory of that car now felt like the first thread unraveling a much larger and more dangerous pattern. I waited until Emma's bedroom light had gone out and the faint music from her speakers had faded into silence. She wasn't home that night. She was at her friend Mia's house for a sleepover, a Friday tradition that had become her small refuge from the house that still carried the echo of Sarah's absence. I had dropped her off earlier that afternoon, kissing her forehead and reminding her to text if she needed anything, grateful for the normalcy of teenage friendships that let her escape the weight we both carried. With the house quiet around me, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop in the darkened kitchen. The footage began in grainy low resolution. Sarah in a downtown Seattle bank vault 6 years earlier, younger and more guarded, withdrawing several thick stacks of cash before handing an envelope to a figure whose face remained hidden in shadow. Her voice came through faintly but clearly. "This ends it. No more hiding. Keep them safe." A second clip followed immediately. Sarah sat alone in what appeared to be a cheap motel room, facing the camera directly with red-rimmed eyes and cheeks streaked from earlier tears. She spoke in a hushed, trembling voice that carried the weight of every unspoken goodbye she had forced herself to swallow. If you're seeing this, Alex, it means something went terribly wrong, or came far too close to going wrong. I'm so sorry. I had to make an impossible choice, between telling you the full truth and risking them finding us all, or disappearing entirely so that you and Emma could keep breathing freely. I love you. I love our girl more than anything in this world. If I'm gone, please know that every single day away was spent trying to protect you both in the only way I believed was possible. Forgive me. Please, try to forgive me. The screen faded to black, leaving only silence and the steady drumming of rain against the windows. My phone rang almost at once. Unknown caller. I answered, and a distorted voice spoke calmly and deliberately. Destroy the drive. Forget you ever saw it. Or Emma disappears next. I ended the call immediately, my hands suddenly cold and unsteady. I walked to the living room window and peered through the rain-streaked glass, seeing nothing at first but wet pavement and the weak glow of street lamps. I exhaled shakily, trying to steady myself, and then looked again. And there he was, the man in the dark hoodie standing motionless across the street, staring directly at the house with a stillness that made the fear coil tight in my chest. The sight of him sent a wave of pure terror through me. My stomach knotted painfully, my breath coming shorter as the distorted voice echoed in my mind. Emma disappears next. This was no random stranger. This was confirmation that the threat was real, immediate, and already too close. I almost dialed 911 right then, my thumb hovering over the emergency keys as panic urged me to call for help. But the note had been explicit. Don't call the police. And the voice on the phone had just promised what would happen to Emma if I did. What if they were monitoring calls? What if they were watching the house even now, waiting for me to make the wrong move? The thought paralyzed me long enough to keep the phone in my hand instead of at my ear. I moved quickly through the house instead, checking every lock twice, sliding deadbolts home, testing windows and doors until I was certain nothing could be forced open without noise. I set the alarm system, the soft beeps echoing in the quiet rooms like a promise of fragile safety. From the garage closet, I grabbed the baseball bat I kept for home defense, its weight solid and reassuring in my grip even if I had never needed to swing it in anger. I texted Emma again, out late handling something urgent. Call if you need me. Stay safe at Mia's. Love you, Dad. Then I sent a quick message to Mia's mom. Just checking in. Everything okay over there? Call if anything seems off at all. With the burner phone in my pocket and the bat on the passenger seat, I pulled out my phone one last time and searched Old Lighthouse Marrowstone Island. The results appeared instantly. An abandoned navigational aid on the north end of Marrowstone Island near Port Townsend Bay, roughly 2 hours north of Bellevue. Satellite images confirmed the details. A crumbling white tower with peeling paint, boarded windows, isolated on a rocky point. It was real, and the drive time matched what I would need to reach it by midnight. If this was a trap, I was stepping directly into it. But if Sarah was alive, if there was even the smallest chance that the woman I had mourned for 6 years was still breathing, still fighting to protect us, then I had no choice but to go. I kept the burner phone on the console, ready to call Tom if needed, and drove north through relentless sheets of rain. The wipers strained against the downpour, headlights carving narrow tunnels through the darkness, every shadow on the roadside seeming to shift and watch as I passed. My mind raced with images of Emma safe at Mia's for the moment, but the threat lingered like poison in my veins. Halfway there, I dialed Tom on the burner. He answered immediately, his voice calm and steady over the speaker. Drive carefully, Alex. I'll be waiting at the lighthouse. Stay on the line if anything feels wrong. I'm with you. 2 hours later, the lighthouse loomed ahead, isolated, decaying, its white tower ghostly in the rain. One flashlight beam waited in the darkness. An older man stepped forward, gray beard, deep-set eyes carrying the weight of years spent carrying secrets. Tom Reynolds, retired private investigator. He spoke without wasting time on greetings. Alex, your wife is alive. The words landed with the force of a physical blow, sending ripples of disbelief, anger, and fragile hope through me all at once. I almost turned and walked back to my car. He opened a folder and showed me the proof. Witness statements, old federal protection documents, identification cards bearing a name I had never known her by. 6 years ago, Sarah had not been just my wife and Emma's mother. The gentlewoman who balanced our household budget and read bedtime stories with voices that made characters come alive. She had been the forensic accountant who discovered that her boss, Richard Kane, a prominent real estate developer, was laundering tens of millions for syndicates that controlled construction contracts, permits, and far darker operations across the Pacific Northwest. She had agreed to wear a wire for nearly 2 years, gathering evidence in secret meetings and tense courtroom testimony behind closed doors. Kane had been sentenced to 25 years. In exchange, the government had given Sarah a new identity and a clean start, a life with me and Emma. But Richard Kane had died in prison the previous year, heart failure, according to the official report. His son Derek had been released early on parole. Derek had grown up convinced that his father had been framed, that Sarah had manufactured evidence to destroy their family. His father had died alone in a cell because of her testimony. Derek wanted the money his father had hidden before the trial, and he wanted retribution on every person whose name appeared in the case files. Sarah had felt him drawing closer, sensed the noose tightening around the fragile safety she had built. She had staged the boating accident, arranged for the vessel to be weakened just enough to capsize convincingly in a storm, ensuring the Coast Guard would find only an empty hull. She had vanished. For 6 years she had lived under a new name in a small Arizona town, waitressing at a quiet roadside diner, renting a modest apartment with cash, avoiding any digital footprint that could be traced. She returned to Seattle only twice a year, always briefly and always from a careful distance, watching Emma's soccer matches from the farthest row of bleachers, observing me dropping our daughter at school from across the street. She never approached, never risked contact. Through Tom and a discreet network of hidden cameras she had kept vigil, convinced that as long as the world believed she was dead, Derek would eventually lose the trail and move on. Tom handed me a small brass key. Safety deposit box. Downtown branch. First thing tomorrow. But do not go home tonight. They're watching. I drove back numb, the rain feeling heavier than before. Morning arrived gray and heavy. At the bank, the safety deposit box contained thick folders of financial records, a burner phone, and a handwritten letter from Sarah. I'm sorry, Alex. This was the only way I knew to keep you both breathing. Tucked among the papers was a photograph. Emma at soccer practice, mid-kick, taken just 2 weeks earlier. The image was sharp and recent. Sarah had been that close. Watching. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Emma's number. A photo. Our daughter tied to a chair in dim light, eyes wide with terror. The message below read, "Bring the account codes, or she joins her mother at the bottom of the sound." The school confirmed Emma had never arrived for first period. I met Tom at a rest stop off I-5. His voice cracked as he spoke. They've been tailing me for weeks. I got careless. Derek didn't find Sarah by chance. He traced my movements, followed old connections, and learned Emma's routines along the way. School, soccer, sleepovers with friends. They grabbed her from Mia's house last night after you left Bellevue. She was supposed to be safe there, but Derek anticipated everything. The files pointed to an abandoned cannery warehouse on the Duwamish River, a contingency location Sarah had prepared years earlier in case the worst came to pass. We went at dusk. The drive felt endless. My heart hammered against my ribs the entire way. Tom carried a concealed handgun he had no legal right to possess anymore. I clutched the burner phone like a lifeline. Inside the warehouse, damp concrete floors, the sharp smell of rust and old salt water, shadows that seemed to breathe and shift. Then Sarah's voice, soft, exhausted, came from the far corner. She was tied to a support beam, alive. Thinner, paler, her hair longer and unkempt, but unmistakably alive. Her eyes found mine and filled with tears the moment she saw me. Before I could take 2 steps toward her, Derek stepped into the open, 2 men flanking him. One was the hoodie figure from outside my house. He gave a slow nod. Same guy, same black sedan outside your kid's school. You really thought no one was watching? Derek pressed a pistol to Emma's temple. She was bound in the opposite corner, breathing in shallow, panicked bursts. You really believed faking her death would protect you? He said. I tracked your helper here. Found Sarah months ago. Kept her breathing, waiting for the perfect leverage. A father will do anything for his daughter. His voice dropped, quieter, almost reflective. My father used to take me fishing on that same sound when I was a kid, before your wife destroyed everything. Sarah spoke urgently, barely above a whisper. Alex? The burner phone. Press send. It's the signal I programmed years ago. Anonymous tip straight to the feds. Derek pressed the barrel harder against Emma's temple. One wrong move, and she's gone before the police even reach the bridge. He began counting slowly. 5. Emma's breath caught in her throat. 4. The metal of the gun gleamed under the dim light. 3. The air felt thick and impossible to breathe. 2. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. 1. Time stretched thin. My mind flashed back to the safety deposit box, those strange repeating number patterns in the financial files. They had reminded me immediately of the Caesar shift ciphers we study in history class when we cover ancient Rome and coded messages in wartime, simple substitutions that conceal meaning until you know the key. I had noticed them earlier but hadn't fully connected them until this moment. I forced my voice steady. The codes are useless without the key phrase. Justice delayed. Pulled straight from your father's trial transcripts. I teach history. I know how these things work. Derek's eyes narrowed. A flicker of greed cut through the rage. He hesitated just long enough. Sarah moved. She drove her heel hard into her guard's knee. The man buckled with a grunt. Chaos erupted. Tom fired a warning shot into the ceiling. Dust and echoes rained down. I lunged forward, tackled the hoodie man near Emma. His gun skittered across the concrete. Sarah broke free of her ropes, grabbed a length of loose metal pipe, swung it at Derek. He staggered back, cursing. She retrieved the fallen pistol, leveled it at him with hands that no longer trembled. Sirens rose in the distance, growing louder, closer. Tom had sent the anonymous tip hours earlier. Derek lunged once more in desperation. Sarah fired, a clean graze across his shoulder. He dropped to his knees, clutching the wound, blood seeping through his fingers. His men raised their hands as sweat breached the doors. As they dragged Derek away in cuffs, he looked back at Sarah. His voice was low and cold. My father died in a cage because of her. Don't get too comfortable. Emma stared at Sarah for what felt like an eternity, eyes searching her mother's face, afraid she might vanish again. Then, in the smallest, most fragile voice I had ever heard, "Mom!" Sarah dropped to her knees. Emma ran into her arms. They clung together, sobbing, rocking gently on the cold floor. I joined them. No words. Just the three of us holding on as though letting go would break something forever. Hey, if you've made it this far and the story's got you hooked, drop a quick comment. Just tell me where you're watching from. And if you want more real-feeling stories like this one, hit subscribe. It really helps me keep going. Thank you. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeps of monitors and the occasional murmur of nurses in the hallway. Sarah's arm had a clean through-and-through graze. Stitched, bandaged, antibiotics started. The doctors wanted her overnight for observation, pain management, fluids. Emma refused to leave her side, curled in the chair beside the bed, holding her mother's good hand tightly, as though releasing it would make everything disappear again. I sat on the other side, watching them both breathe, watching Sarah's chest rise and fall in a rhythm I had once taken for granted. She looked at me across Emma's sleeping form. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. Every single day I told myself it was temporary. Every day it became harder to stay away. I kept pictures of you both in a locked box under my bed. I would look at them at night and promise myself, soon I'll come home. I nodded. Words were still too big, too raw. Over the next few days the room filled and emptied with people. Police detectives taking careful statements, federal agents reviewing Sarah's old files, a child therapist speaking softly with Emma about fear and reunion. Sarah slept in fits, exhausted from years of vigilance finally catching up. When she was awake she told us pieces in quiet fragments. The long, lonely Arizona nights when the diner closed and silence pressed in. The ache of watching Emma grow through a telephoto lens from across soccer fields. The constant, gnawing fear that one careless moment would bring Derek to our door. She cried when she spoke about missing birthdays, missing the day Emma got her first period and had to navigate it with only me fumbling through explanations and Google searches. I listened. I let her speak. There would be time for my own questions later. Back home after discharge, we sat together on the living room couch. Rain pattered softly outside. Sarah looked smaller somehow, wrapped in one of my old university sweatshirts, hair still hospital washed and damp. Emma pressed against her like she was anchoring her mother in place. I couldn't hold it in any longer. 6 years, Sarah. 6 years I thought you were gone forever. I buried an empty casket. I answered Emma's questions about heaven and why Mommy had to leave. I grieved you through every holiday, every milestone. Her first school dance, her first heartbreak. I had no one to call. You let me believe you drowned. How could you not trust me with even a fragment of the truth? She cried quietly, tears sliding down her cheeks without sound. I was terrified. If you knew, if anyone knew, they would have used you against me. Disappearing was the only shield I had left. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I'd come back the moment it was safe. But safe never arrived. I stood up, walked to the garage, sat in the dark on an old wooden stool, staring at the empty passenger seat of my car, where Sarah used to sit, where she'd laugh at my terrible singing on long drives, where she'd rest her hand on my knee and say nothing needed saying. Anger burned hot and bright for hours. Then it cooled into something heavier, something clearer. If the roles had been reversed, if I had uncovered the danger first, if the only way to keep Sarah and Emma alive was to vanish, to let them think I was dead, to watch from shadows while Sarah raised our daughter alone, would I have done it? Yes. God help me, I would have. I would have lied deeper, stayed gone longer, carried the silence forever if it meant they were safe. I went back inside, sat beside her, took her hand, the one without the bandage. I was furious, I said. Betrayed doesn't even begin to cover it. But if our places had been switched, if it was me protecting you and Emma, I'd have done the same thing. Maybe worse. I'd have lied longer, deeper, whatever it took to keep you both breathing. She squeezed my hand. Tears again. I never stopped loving you, either of you. We talked through the night. No more secrets. Emma slept between us on the couch. Finally peaceful, her breathing even and deep. Derek faced kidnapping, attempted murder, conspiracy charges. The evidence from Sarah's files sealed it. Life sentence with no possibility of parole. The hidden accounts were seized and returned to victims. The syndicates took a devastating hit. 6 months later, Sarah's scars had faded to thin white lines. She started volunteering at Emma's school, helping in the library where she used to read to children before everything changed. Emma's therapy sessions helped. She calls Sarah, Mom, again without hesitation, without that tiny flicker of fear. I still teach history. But now I spend more time talking about choices, the hard ones, the loving ones, the ones history books rarely record but families carry forever. Tom testified during the trial. Afterward, he moved to Montana, said he was finally done looking over his shoulder. We sent him a Christmas card with a photo of the 3 of us smiling. On the anniversary of the accident, we drove to the lighthouse together. We left flowers on the rocks. No words needed. Emma found a sealed letter in Sarah's old travel bag. From 6 years ago, addressed to her. She read it aloud, voice trembling but growing stronger with each word. My sweet girl, if I'm not there one day, know that Mommy left to keep you safe. I watched you grow from far away. Every goal you scored, every laugh, every time you looked up at the sky. I saw. I love you forever. Always. We cried together, held each other tighter. As we stood on the rocks, I noticed a car parked up the hill. Engine idling, lights off. For a second, I thought the nightmare wasn't over. Then the door opened and a federal agent stepped out. He nodded once. Just keeping watch. You're safe now. We made it through. Sometimes Emma still asks why Mom had to leave for so long. I tell her the truth in the simplest way I know. Some people protect their families with hugs, and some protect them with sacrifice. For 6 years I thought I buried my wife. Turns out I buried the truth instead. Sometimes the person who lies to save you loves you the most. Thanks for listening.